Hi, guys, and welcome back to Too Much. I'm your host, Emma Page. Just coming off of Labor Day, so puffy, filled with wine, a little burnt, the usual. Hope you guys had a great Labor Day weekend. As a reminder, if you are listening to this and wondering where the fuck the video is on YouTube. So if you prefer to watch me do this, go over there. But yeah, I'm just going to go right down the rabbit hole today because I was running a little bit late because I was working on today's episode. And as I was working on it, I was also eating for the first time today because I had not eaten until 2 p.m. because I had to shoot content for a brand earlier in the day and it was clothing and tight dresses. So I didn't want to eat. So everything was jammed into just before coming here. And why do I say this? Because I left my apartment a mess. I ran out the door and I shot a quick text to Mr. Right. And I said, I hope to dear God that I make it home before you because I left the apartment a mess and I'm so sorry. And he said, don't worry. And that is my tee up to today's episode, which is about living with someone. Living with someone is probably the most impactful contributor to your everyday life. Whether you live alone or with a roommate or with a partner, it is one of the biggest driving factors to your daily mood, your sanity, and your relationships, and maybe even friendships. It affects a lot. So I thought it was pretty important to talk about it. Also because I, entered a new stage of my life almost 1 year ago when I moved in with Mr. Right. And, we're kind of nearing this next stage of life where we'll hopefully get engaged soon. He doesn't listen to the podcast. It's okay. So I kind of wanted to talk about this before we get engaged. Thought that was important. Starting from the beginning, going from your parents' home to living on your own with a roommate probably, and then living by yourself is such an integral part to growing up and adulthood in general. It's essentially when you learn about yourself and learn about the dynamics of other people, which probably sounds like obvious, but the things I learned when I was living with other people by myself and now I'm with Mr. Right completely reshaped who I was and really made me grow up. And I need to be completely honest, living with someone has never come easy to me. I always thought I was an extroverted person and that, I could not get along with anyone because we all know that's not true. But I just thought it was never going to be an issue for me to have someone else in my space all the time. But I think what I've learned is it takes a very specific kind of person to live with me and vice versa. After moving out of my parents' house at 18 to go to college, I lived with roommates until I was 27 years old. So 9 years I was living with roommates. And then after that, I lived alone for 3 years until I was 30 and I moved in with Mr. Right. First time I ever lived outside of my parents' house was in my freshman dorm, which happened to be an apartment in New York City, in Chelsea. So not only was I always so independent and like dying to get out of my parents' house, but it was New York City. So I was about to live like my gossip girl, Devil Wears Prada life. I was going to FIT. Like I could not wait. But what I quickly came to learn is that even though you are now out of your parents' house, how you were raised in your parents' house still has a lasting effect on how you are going to interact with your new roomies. I grew up in a household where fighting was pretty normal. We were no stranger to raised voices and, you kind of got things accomplished by yelling at each other. It's not that it was okay, but it was normal. It happened so often that my brain as, a infancy to 18-year-old was like, this is how people function in the real world. Not quite. So that was kind of the first shift I ever went through because, it's all fun and games and independence and you're excited. And then you suddenly realize you have to deal with other people's personalities, strangers' personalities who are raised very differently from you. So naturally, after the first semester, I moved out of my first dorm because I didn't get along with one of my roommates. We were in a quad, there was 4 of us, and I got along great with the other 2, but they ended up transferring out because they didn't really like the city life. And the 4th one and I just didn't get along. Luckily, I had made a best friend She didn't like her roommates either. So we were like, fuck it, let's just move into a new dorm. And we got a new quad where it was myself, my new best friend, our good friend, and then a stranger. And then again, I ran into a couple issues. The stranger and I did not get along. Everything was fine for like the first month or two, but then slowly but surely, her true colors started to show, and those colors did not get along with my colors. It is a long story that I'm going to save for another day because it's kind of a wild story. But what I realized about myself, one of my first lessons about myself, is that I had no problem with confrontation. And that's something that I obviously knew during high school because I had no problem confronting people then. But apparently, I had no inhibitions about confronting someone in my own living quarters and risking all hell breaking loose, a hostile living environment, maybe someone coming and stabbing me during my sleep. I had no fear of that. All I'll say for now is that we almost got kicked out of the dorms by the end of the year. And I ended up moving off campus with my best friend that was in the dorm with me. At that point, I'm officially fully free of any sort of supervision. So no RAs, no schools, no nothing. I am living off campus on the Upper East Side in my very first apartment. And I lived with roommates for the next 7 years. I've lived with pretty much every type of person. I've lived with best friends. I've lived with acquaintances, Craigslist finds, old bosses, gay best friends, friends of friends. But when you live with someone, it is a completely different ballgame than just being friends with them. Sometimes living with a friend is the worst thing you could possibly do because you may be best friends with someone, but you just can't live with them. And that is very normal and something I learned very quickly. The one girl that I lived with, that was my best friend, we lived together for a few years and are still best friends. That did not taint our relationship at all. There was another girl that I lived with where it went to shit. I think I need to do another like fully offshoot episode of living with friends and just the horror stories I've had because I've had so many. And not necessarily because I'm like an awful person to live with, but like I've just lived in a million places. I definitely was the problem sometimes, but like not all the time. Anyways, what became very clear to me is that when you live with someone, the three most important things are communication, compromise, and boundaries. How are you going to organize the groceries? Do you share groceries? Are you going to allow them to borrow your clothing and go into your closet without asking first? What's everyone's feeling on having friends over, hosting parties, having boys over, having boys stay over, especially when there's a shared bathroom? Things you never thought you were going to have to clear with anyone else ever again because your parents aren't around suddenly becomes World War III if you don't talk about it. And you never know what it is that's going to piss someone else off because, like I said, you're raised in different households. You don't know each other on that level of intimacy. I once had someone get mad at me for how loudly I was chewing my celery. I shit you not. This girl looked at me. This was roommate freshman year of college. I was just chewing my celery and she was working and she was like, "Can you not chew your celery so loud?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll swallow it whole for you." Like, okay. I get that it was probably an annoying noise, but like, fucking let me live. But this is what I'm talking about. There's so many things that you don't know if it's going to piss someone else off unless you talk about it or if it happens or if you experience it. We go from these rules that our parents enforced to conforming to your roommate just to keep the peace in your own home. Because if you don't, it affects your mood, your stress levels, and it creates overall hostility in your home and resentment and slamming doors and little passive aggression. And then there's the community and privacy aspect of it. Are you guys going to be friends outside of the apartment? Does your roommate expect you to invite them to everything? I've had both. I've had friends where we were friends inside and outside of the apartment, which kind of can apply some like added pressure to you because you always feel like you need to include them. And then the second you don't, you're worried about it. And then I've had the other sides of things where I lived with someone that I hardly knew. We became friends, but there was no expectation of us inviting each other to, our outings and things like that. The reality is that people's expectations and their boundaries are vastly different, and you will not know what they are until you either encounter a conflict or you talk about it. Maybe you have different lifestyles. One person is a night owl. The other one is a early bird catches the worm kind of a guy. One's fine with dishes in the sink. The other one has a panic attack over a crumb. you learn that not everyone lives like you and you have to meet in the middle. And then inevitably, there's the shared decisions, decor, groceries, even the thermostat settings. All of those are going to become negotiations because compromise is not about winning, it's about coexisting without resentment. And as much as I think it's the absolute worst to live with a roommate, it is an integral part of growing up and adulthood because you are forced to adapt to someone else's wants and needs in very tight quarters. Compromise in living situations teach you how to bend without breaking. And those boundaries that you establish when you're sharing a home with someone is just training ground for saying no without guilt, which all comes in handy in love, professional relationships, family, all of it. Now, after going through all of this shell shock in every living situation that I was in, because mind you, I lived in 5 different apartments with roommates from age 20 to 27. So that was a lot. I finally decided it was time to go out on my own and live by myself. Now, context, right before I lived by myself, I did have a short stint in Seattle with Washington, who I have referenced a couple times, but never actually told the full story. So I will do that as its own episode because that is a wild fucking story about how we started dating and also the demise of it. But after my last roommate apartment, it was right when COVID hit. My roommates were both going to move out and I was dating him and he was like, why don't you just come live up in Seattle while we figure out kind of what's going on and when you're going to go back to the office? You're up there a month at a time anyway. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So I moved up there for like 8 months and I shipped my car up there. I put all my stuff in storage. So I was kind of squatting there. That's how I like to say it. I was never fully like living with him on paper. There was no lease, but I did live with a boy for like 8 or 9 months. So that was like a little transition out of the roommate phase. And then I decided it's time to live by myself. And thanks to him, I could not have been more ready to just get rid of all the bullshit, get rid of all the rules, and be on my own. And I also wanted to feel like an adult. And to me, having a roommate didn't feel that way. So I wanted my space, my rules, full control, bliss. And in true Emma fashion of the craziest shit always happens to me, the scariest thing happened to me when I was looking for my very first apartment. So I was moving to West Hollywood. I had a bunch of apartments that I was going to go look at. And I had one scheduled and I was speaking with the guy. I was doing it through apartments.com. And I get there and I knock on the door and no one's answering. I text him. I'm like, hey, I'm here. No response, no nothing. And I don't know if this is a thing in New York. I can't remember, but it's a thing in LA sometimes where you do like a self showing where they will have a lockbox or a code or if like the door's unlocked or something. So I did try the door and it opened. So I just went inside and the apartment was fully empty. Like it was supposed to be rented. It wasn't like it was someone's home. And the guy hadn't answered me and I was there. So I was just like, whatever. So I go into the apartment. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I film all apartments when I go see them because I want to remember, I want to take notes, I want to have the full experience when I'm weighing out my options and looking at all the different apartments afterwards. So as I'm going through this apartment, I'm videoing and I get into the bedroom and I kind of pan over to the closet and I take a step back to show the full closet. And then I go up and I want to film the inside of the closet so I know how big it is. So as I do, just like this, all of a sudden, I look down and there is a man in the closet laying on the ground. You never know what you're going to do in these types of situations, whether you're going to fight or flight. And let me just tell you, I fucking flew. I see this guy's legs. It's like the fucking Wizard of Oz with like the house that falls on the legs. And I don't even think I stayed there long enough to look up and see his face, but he started to move because I opened the door and I made a noise and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I'm pretty sure he was sleeping. Again, did not stick around long enough to know. Booked it out of there as fast as I possibly could. Like hyperventilating, screaming all the way out. I have the whole thing on video. I'll put it in the carousel. So I get back to my car. I'm hyperventilating. I'm now blowing up this guy's phone on apartment.com. And I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck? There was a man in the apartment. I could have died. Like, what if he was standing there with a knife and just killed me? What if he was waiting for me? Luckily, I'm pretty sure he was asleep and was just looking for a place to crash. as was I. But yeah, it was pretty traumatizing. Apartments.com did nothing to help me. They said they were going to escalate it. I don't know if they did. I was like, you should give me a free apartment for a year for the emotional damage you have done. I shit you not. Now, when I am looking at new apartments and I go to open a closet, my heart like skips. This happened to me last weekend. My parents were looking at a new house and I was literally afraid to open a closet. Anyways, so that was my first time looking at an apartment solo. Awesome. And I was like, this seems like a really good idea. Living alone seems awesome. Remember that time when I accidentally went to the moon at the airport? Well, I finally figured out the right dosing for me and I switched to psilocybin with Schedule 35. Fun fact, when you take shrooms at a subhallucinogenic level, it can sharpen your focus, unleash your creativity, hone your mental clarity, boost your productivity, and even ease your anxiety, which is exactly why I started microdosing with Schedule 35. You guys know I am a one-man show, so staying on top of everything and always being on creatively can sometimes be a challenge. Even I can admit that. But ever since working Schedule 35 into my daily routine, it has been a complete game changer. It's helped get my creative juices flowing, keep me focused, and I am ready to take this podcast to the moon. Their vegan capsules are accurately dosed so that I get the perfect edge for even my craziest days without the hallucinogenic effects. And if you don't want the capsules, you can do chocolates or you could do gummies, or you can even do their shroom-infused tea. Each order ships discreetly and comes with a microdosing regimen with all the education you need to get started and keep you on track. Get 15% off all orders with code too much at schedule35.co. That's 15% off at schedule35.co with code too much. Happy microdosing. So yeah, I didn't go with that apartment. I did get an apartment in Venice and I lived there for a year and then ended up moving back to West Hollywood. But I had the best time. I really learned so much about myself. And I think the most important part about living by yourself is that the stage is for self-awareness. You are never going to be self-sufficient or feel self-sufficient if you always have someone that's a knock away on the next room that'll come kill the spider or help you fix the toilet. Living by yourself just teaches you things that living with a roommate never will. It teaches you problem-solving skills, not only physically, like learning how to hang a picture, but also mentally and emotionally, because you're forced to self-soothe and talk yourself off ledges. The biggest lesson I learned from living by myself was that crying about your problems will never solve your problems. There is nothing more humbling than crying hysterically alone in your apartment, in the fetal position on your couch, and then you kind of start to like wind down from the crying and you sit up and you're just kind of like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go make a sandwich now or something. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I crying? What did that just solve? Sure, it's like a release emotionally sometimes, but I learned to just pull myself up by my bootstraps and solve my problems and get the fuck over it and power through shit. A lot of my problems are clearly evident there, but you know, when you have a roommate, you can just fall into this trap of like venting and talking about the same problem over and over and over again until you're blue in the face. You come home and you bitch about the same guy. It's like when you're home and you're alone, you work through your problems a lot more efficiently and a lot quicker, I think, than when you have other people there who are egging you on. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes you have roommates that pull you out of your delusion, but you got to learn how to pull yourself out of your delusion. So I lived alone for almost 4 years. I did a year and a half in LA, and then I moved my ass back to New York solo also. And I lived by myself here for 2 more years. And it was awesome. Being in your late 20s and being able to afford your own rent, all the furniture that you want that's in your style, host people, have parties, not have to ask anyone for permission about anything. And hopefully, at least in my situation, still have money left over to like live the life you want and go out to dinners and whatever. It was the fucking best. And I did it when I was single. Like I was solo and I was just like living my life to the fullest. So if you are ever trying to decide whether or not you should live by yourself, do it. Please do it. You have to do it. It's actually the most integral part of growing up, as I've said. And I loved it so much that I got to the point where I sat there and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to go back to living with someone. And then I met Mr. Right. We started dating in September 2023. And the first time I ever brought up living together was in February 2024. So, like 4.5 months into dating. But I think I was kind of just like, I'm just putting this on your radar. My lease ends in August. When does yours end? And he was like, lady, you're scaring me. But with him, I just know. I know that's cliche, but it's like what Harry said to Sally. When you realize that you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. And that's what it was. I was just like, I want to marry you, dude. And like, can we just skip all this bullshit? Whatever. Might have been helpful to have a roommate at that point to pull me out of that delusion, but alas, he brought me down to earth and he was like, we're not ready. And I was like, okay, fine. And I did have to respect that. Although I did feel like he was trying to be a little too traditional about it. Like he was like, we need to wait a year. And I was like, timelines are kind of stupid. And it should really just be about what you're feeling. And if you feel like you're ready to move in together, you should. And if you want to. I did move in with him in September 2024 until we found an apartment to move in together. We started looking in October. We found an apartment and moved in November 1st. So we are coming up on a year. He was able to break his lease because his ended in February. So we compromised, and it was one of the first of many compromises. And everything was honestly pretty smooth sailing when we first moved in together. We were on the same page about budget, where we wanted to live. You know, he was steadfast on a washer, dryer, and unit. I was like, we don't need that. And then I was like, I really want a second bedroom as a closet. He was like, we don't need that. But we were both like, we can figure this out, make this work. So we did. We found an amazing apartment. We fell in love with it. It was one of the first apartments we saw. And it was so exciting. It was such a fun process, like going to find your future home with someone that you love and that you see the rest of your life with. But there were a lot of things upon moving in together that were definitely unforeseen. Things we would not have known about each other until we moved in together, until we were taking a peek under the hood, seeing each other at our most vulnerable and most raw and 24 hours a day. And yes, at this point, we had traveled a lot together and we had spent extended amounts of time together, like living in one place. But living together is a totally different ballgame. And that, my friends, is why it is so important to think long and hard about this decision before you move in with someone. Because moving in with someone will not solve your problems. You know, if you are fighting because of time spent apart or just like fighting a lot and you think that taking that next step is going to fix things for you, it is not. And even worse than that, the last thing you want to do is move in with someone because it feels convenient or because you're spending so much time at their place and not enough time at yours and you're wasting money on rent. That is not a reason to move in with someone. I promise. Sure, it is a factor when you are ready and you do want to move in together. Like, did it cross our minds that we're going to be saving money? Yes. But in no way was it the reason we moved in together. And hindsight, I am happy that Mr. Wright encouraged us to wait, 6 more months to move in together. I mean, I brought that up 4 months in. We were still in a honeymoon phase. Months 7 to 12 in our relationship, it's not like they were hard, but we definitely had our spats here and there. But they were always about core things that we needed to learn about each other before moving in together. And aside from me talking about how I grew up in a family that fought a lot, I am a firm believer in if you can't survive a few fights with your partner, you were not built to survive forever. The little spats my partner and I had were not deal breakers, they were checkpoints. Core issues that we had to get through so that they would never trip us up again. But don't get me wrong, we were not done learning. We just started learning different things, good and bad. But the shell shock of moving in together brought up a lot of insecurities within me personally. Suddenly, I was hyper aware that he was going to be seeing everything in my life, everything about me, every flaw, every celebration, every breakdown, my good days and my bad. And that kind of freaked me out a little bit in the beginning. It's like I wake up in the morning and maybe I have pimples, my eyes are swollen, I look gross, I have morning breath or something. And he is there to see that. I receive bad news from work, maybe I lose a client, and I am going down this shame spiral. And he is there to see that. I decide to skip a workout and stay home and have ice cream instead. He is there to see that. Or you guys get into a fight and you have nowhere else to go. You are the most exposed and the most vulnerable. And it can be really uncomfortable for someone to see all of your imperfections. And on top of this, I found myself even falling into a comparison trap sometimes. And this might be very unique to Mr. Right, but he is so disciplined and so organized and like just like annoyingly perfect sometimes. But, he wakes up every single morning and works out, and I don't all the time. And I started to make myself feel bad about that. These little guilty pleasures that would have otherwise been hidden from him, he was now seeing. But after he did not shudder or falter or make me feel bad about any of these things, I quickly realized that I did make the right choice. And eventually, these comparisons became things that motivated me and things that inspired me instead of making me feel bad. So we learned a lot about each other. I learned that he thinks it's perfectly normal to throw away someone else's leftovers after one day of them being in the fridge. And he learned that I think it's perfectly normal to take 2 to 3 business days after returning home from a trip to unpack my suitcase. So there's a lot of ebb and flow. But as he learned more about me, I continued to learn more about myself. Like, I had no idea how much alone time I actually need. My whole life, I thought I was this extroverted person whose battery was always on and I was always able to just like entertain and be on, whatever. And that's not the case. The biggest difference here between living with a roommate, a friend, and living with a partner is that when you're living with a roommate, you might and probably do have your own outside lives. But when it's your partner, you are truly living all of your life together. You're with each other 24/7 outside of work if they don't work from home. And I love him with all my heart. I love spending all of my time with him. But for example, like his love language is physical touch. And as I said in the last episode, that's not necessarily mine anymore. And I had to explain to him pretty early on that I need to be able to coexist. I need to have that alone time together. Because in our downtime, when he would want to cuddle or he would just come over and kiss me a lot when I'm trying to work or something, I started to feel really guilty for not giving him attention. But to me, I'm like, this is our downtime. This is like the coexisting time. So, like I said earlier about when you have a roommate, that communication is so fucking important because I could have let it build up into a resentment. I could have just gotten annoyed every time and started being passive aggressive and rolling my eyes or walking away or any of those things. But because I want our relationship to work so badly and this is the future that I'm building, I chose the communication route. I chose to swallow my pride and bite the bullet and just be like, hey, I need to exist. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I said to him. And like, I just need my personal space. And it has nothing to do with you. It's just how I'm going to keep my sanity. So I said this to him and things got better because he also cares about my needs. And then, of course, there's the biggest shift of them all, navigating sex. I thought this was lore. I thought there's no fucking way. I will never be in a relationship where we're not having sex every day. But then I got to be 30. So that already started to kind of go out the window before we moved in together. But when we moved in together, it's a real thing. Because when you have the option to have sex with someone every single morning, afternoon, and or night, you kind of find yourself saying, I'm really tired. Can we do it tomorrow? And I hate myself for that. But it's like you kind of fall into this. You're not going anywhere. I'm really tired. This isn't sexy right now. We were just sitting here watching TV and it's difficult. And that was also something that had to be a conversation where, I think at one point he was feeling like it was his fault and that I just didn't want to. And I had to reassure him and say, no, I promise you that's not the case. I just am tired. And the way I am stimulated sexually is by some working up to it. Like I need to kind of feel it building before we even start the foreplay. Like, when we go on a hot date, let me dress up. I come home, we, canoodle, whatever. I had to explain that to him. It's all about communications and boundaries. He did say that he wanted it a bit more. I said I can make that happen. And it's fine. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't resentment. It wasn't passive aggression. It was just clear and communicative. So in saying all this, if this is happening to you, know that it's normal. There's a reason everyone jokes about it when you move in with someone. There's a reason everyone's like, oh, there goes the sex. It's because it's happening to a lot of people and it's very common. And you shouldn't feel like it's an obligation. but you also shouldn't lose sight of your partner's needs. And you should make sure you're talking about it and making sure that both of your needs are being met. And then, of course, there's all the fun things you could do to spice it up, which we can get into another day. But it's a real thing. It happens. And your relationship isn't any less because of it until it becomes like you're going weeks or something. And then I would say, you got to check in. So these are the conversations you need to be having when you're first moving in together or before you move in together. And then on top of these, you have like the domestic stuff. It's like, who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to sign up for the cable? Who's going to take out the trash? What will the chores be? I mean, like, we don't have something set in stone. I'm pretty sure in the beginning of us living together, I was like, boys do the garbage. And like, I typically clean a lot. He likes to hire a cleaning lady. I told him that makes me feel like less of a woman when he does that. But it's fucking fun. It should be fun. And I think one of the most beautiful things about it is that we are laying down the foundation for the family and the home that we will eventually build. We are making the decisions now about how we are going to eventually run our household. We're learning where each other's strengths lie and where maybe the other one needs to come in with a layup. And it should be really fun and exciting. And if it's not, that is a huge red flag. So the big picture here is that each stage builds a different muscle: adaptability, independence, partnership. Living with someone is a mirror. I say this all the time. Being with someone is a mirror, living with someone is a mirror. Depending on who it is, it will bring out different parts of you. It will show you things about yourself that you did not know were there. So let the people you are living with kind of be a filter and help you figure out who you should be with. And remember that when you are living with someone before marriage, it is still a trial phase. You are not married yet. And although it's a pain in the ass to move out, you should never feel trapped when you're unhappy because of the sunk cost fallacy. You shouldn't feel like, well, we'll have to find a new place to live. The lease isn't up yet. We bought all this furniture together. Who fucking cares? None of that is worth your sanity and your happiness. And essentially, you're wasting time if you're staying with someone because of all those things. So just remember that, like, yes, it's going to suck when you have to move out if you do end up breaking up, but that pain is temporary. Everything happens for a reason. It'll always make you happier on the other side because you're opening yourself up to all the new possibilities and new opportunities. Again, I will get into this guy another day, but when I was living with Washington for that short stint, I had all my shit up there and I had to pack it up and it sucked. It definitely did delay me breaking up with him, but I was so much happier when I did because every day leading up to that, we were fighting. I was unhappy, but I was trying to make it work because we lived together. Like, that is just no way to live your life. But hopefully you get ahead of all of this before moving in with someone and you make the decision that is right for you. You should live with someone that you never need a break from. That if you are stuck in a snowstorm, the power goes out, you two will have the time of your lives and you can bunker down together and still enjoy each other's company. I know I did say that, like, I still need alone time from Mr. Right, but like, it's not because I'm sick of him. It's just because, like, I just need to decompress a little bit. It could be in the other room. I don't need him to leave or anything like that, but I've communicated it. So, I mean, the biggest takeaways and the tools I bestow upon you to thrive in living with someone is, number one, obviously, communicate, 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 communicate. And you should have communication rituals. This is actually a great tip when you're living with someone of how you can communicate what's been bothering you or something like that. I call this the airing of the grievances. And this is something that my partner and I have been doing. And it's just a no pressure, good humored conversation where we kind of go back and forth and say things that have been pissing us off a little bit in the weeks leading up to that. And we basically just say, you can't get mad at the other person for what we're about to say. It's a no pressure situation. And I promise it is so helpful in not being passive aggressive, avoiding resentment, and keeping your home happy and healthy. Next, set your house rules, do your non-negotiables, do that early on and hold each other accountable to them. Another one, keep the romance alive, especially when the roommate feeling kicks in. That's not good. Do what you got to do. Get a vibrator, dress up, watch porn, just do something. Do something about it if it gets bad. And lastly, outside friendships and space still matter. Make sure you have your own lives outside of the apartment. Make sure you are filling your own cup, because once you are relying on your partner to be your partner, your roommate, your therapist, your coworker, all these things. That is a lot of pressure and weight to put on someone. And even the strongest, most secure people can break under that. So, yeah, that was like a very long slew of stuff for this episode. I didn't think I was going to get into all the things that I got into. And it just like, it was a big ramble. It's one big ramble episode. So I'm sorry about that. I know I spoke really fast, but I'm kind of out of time, guys. So that's it. And I hope I didn't scare you into moving in with someone. It's awesome. I love it. Mr. Right and I are like having a blast. But there's honeymoon phase into reality phase, and reality phase can be awesome if you set yourself up for success. That's all I have. Like, follow, subscribe, comment below. Let me know what your living situation is. Let me know if you've ever lived with anyone or any horror roommate stories. Those are fun. Follow Emma's Too Much everywhere and rate 5 stars if you like me and made it this far. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.